On a cramped street where laundry lines crisscrossed the sky and bicycles leaned against stair rails, a tall, narrow tenement house rose like a stack of brick boxes. On the very top floor, beneath a roof patched in many places, lived a man whose neighbors called him simply the Wizard. He did not deny the title. He spent his days not in ordinary work, but in long hours of reading strange volumes, mixing powders that hissed when they touched water, and watching the slow swirl of liquids in blackened cauldrons. In his single room, shelves sagged under the weight of books on magic from ages past. Bottles and vials crowded every flat surface, some glowing faintly, some dark as dried ink. What he did not know about wizardry, he considered hardly worth knowing at all. He might have lived in perfect contentment, lost in his experiments and thoughts, had the world agreed to leave him alone. But the world, as it so often does, continued to knock. Chapter 1. The Wizard Who Wanted Silence. From early morning until late afternoon, the wizard's studies were plagued by interruptions. Tenement life did not respect private contemplations. At dawn, the Iceman would thunder up the stairs with his tongs and blocks, thudding his fist against the wizard's door to ask whether he needed ice today. An hour later, the milkman came, his heavy boots booming, his call echoing up the stairwell. Immediately afterward would come the baker's boy with a basket of rolls, and trailing him, the laundryman with bundled linens and a ledger of small debts. The peanut woman, whose cart rattled on the street below, found it convenient to climb the many flights whenever business was slow, hoping the mysterious gentleman at the top would finally relent and buy a paper sack of warm nuts. Some days, neighbors arrived as well, clutching their troubles. A baby who would not sleep, a sweetheart who had grown cold, a toothache, a quarrel. They believed that a man who knew so much about spells had surely some spare time to cure everyday woes. The wizard did not sell peanuts, milk, or bread. He did not need his shirt scrubbed daily. He certainly did not care to listen to quarrels about lost hats or stubborn babies. Each knock dragged him out of deep concentration. Each time he opened the door and curtly dismissed the caller, the delicate thread of his last thought snapped. More than once a carefully measured potion bubbled over or cooled too quickly while he scowled at an unwanted visitor. After many such days, his annoyance hardened from a passing cloud into a fixed storm. "If only people would stay away," he muttered, pacing between shelves. "If only something would keep them from my door." He pondered the matter, as wizards do, for he disliked expending his magic on ordinary problems. There must be a practical solution, something that would stand guard and require no effort from him. At last he concluded that what he needed was not another spell, but a dog. A good dog, he reasoned, would bark at each intruder and send them scuttling back down the stairs. A good dog would not ask foolish questions or ring the bell for conversation. It would simply stand there, solid, loyal, and noisy. There remained only one difficulty. He had no dog. He did not know where to buy one, nor did he wish to spend tiny fragments of his precious thought learning about dog food and collars and fleas. In the room just below his own, however, lived a man who might help him in a different way. This neighbor was a glass blower, poor but skilled, thin of purse but rich in patience. Day after day the wizard heard him at his work, the small furnace humming and the sound of his breath shaping molten glass into roses, bowls, vases, and ornaments that sparkled like jewels when the light struck them. One afternoon, when the Iceman's knock had just broken a particularly promising line of research, the wizard snatched up his robe and stalked downstairs. Without preamble, he stepped into the glassblower's modest room. The man looked up from the delicate blue flower pot he was shaping, its rim expanding slowly at the end of his hollow rod. Within it, a rosebush of pink glass began to take form, leaves of green curving outward like frozen flames. "Where might I find a dog?" the wizard demanded. The glassblower did not startle. Tenement living had made him used to sudden visits. "What sort of dog?" he asked, still turning the rod carefully. "A dog that will bark at any soul who dares to come near my door," replied the wizard. "A dog that needs no feeding, sheds no hair, catches no fleas, and obeys me without question. A dog that imposes no trouble whatsoever. That sort," he concluded. The glassblower smiled faintly. "Such a creature is rare in this world," he said. The wizard watched him shape a leaf, the molten glass stretching obediently. Slowly, another idea formed. "Could you not make me one?" he asked. "Not of flesh, but of glass." The glassblower lowered his work for a moment, his eyes curious. "I could blow you a glass dog," he said. "It would be as pretty as you please, but glass does not bark." The wizard waved a hand, calm once more, now that the problem had shifted into familiar territory. "Leave that to me. If I cannot make a glass dog bark, I am not the wizard I think I am." "Very well," the glassblower answered. "I will craft such a dog, but my time is all I have to sell. I must be paid for it." "Money is an abomination," the wizard replied. "I have none, but I have powders and drops that will do things to the body which no coin can purchase. Tell me, what hurts you? What burden of flesh would you lay aside?" The glassblower hesitated. Years of leaning over furnaces had bent his back and knotted his joints. "I suffer from stiffness and pain," he admitted at last. "The doctor calls it rheumatism. If you can cure that, I will make your dog." The wizard nodded. "Done. Make him pink," he added after a moment's reflection. "Pink is an unusual color for barking dogs. It will remind visitors that they are not dealing with ordinary household pets." The glassblower chuckled. "A rosy watchdog it shall be," he agreed, and set aside his current work. The wizard left him to his craft, climbing again to his room with the relief of a man who has successfully passed off a mundane problem to someone more inclined to deal with matter than spirit. Chapter 2. The Pink Dog and the Single Drop. The next morning, as the wizard was adjusting the flame under a cauldron of simmering green liquid, a cautious knock sounded at his door. Expecting yet another interruption from the outside world, he opened it with a scowl, only to find not a peanut woman or baker's boy, but the glassblower. Under the artisan's arm rested a small creature crafted entirely of shining glass. The wizard stepped aside and let him in. With great care, the glassblower placed his work on the table. The dog was no larger than one of the wizard's old spell books, yet it possessed a compact dignity. Its body was of soft, luminous pink, with fine strands of spun glass forming a coat that looked almost like silky fur, frozen in motion. Around its neck twined a ribbon of deep blue glass, the ends curling like real cloth. Its eyes were two tiny beads of black glass, bright and sharp. They caught the light in such a way that for a moment the wizard could almost believe the little creature already watched him. He circled the table, examining the way the legs were shaped to support the slight body, how the ears pricked alertly. "You have skill," he admitted. "It is well you think so," said the glass-blower. "Now, about the cure for my joints?" The wizard went to a shelf lined with vials, each stoppered carefully. After selecting one no larger than a man's thumb, he held it up. To the glass-blower's eye, the container appeared almost empty. Only when he squinted could he see a single droplet clinging to the bottom. "This," said the wizard, "is all you require. A single drop of this liquid will drive away any sickness known among human beings. Wounds will close, bones knit, fevers break. It is the only such drop in all the world. How I fashioned it, I no longer recall. The recipe has slipped from my mind, never to return. Guard it as you would all your treasures combined." The glass-blower frowned. "It seems a small payment for so fine a dog," he murmured. "Will that one drop truly cure the aches in my bones?" "If it cannot," the wizard replied, "nothing can. Use it wisely." The artisan turned the vial carefully in his hand, watching the tiny bead of liquid slide faintly against the glass. "I thank you," he said at last, and took his leave. Left alone with his new guardian, the wizard clasped his hands and set about the part of the arrangement that pleased him most, the enchantment. He placed the glass dog in the center of the floor, cleared his throat, and began to speak words that curled and twisted like smoke. The air in the room shivered. Small sparks danced along the dog's pink back. The wizard's fingers traced intricate patterns. The dog's glass eyes flickered, then brightened. First, its tail gave a tentative shake, a side-to-side motion like a flicker of uncertain flame. Then one delicate glass eyelid lowered and rose again in a slow, knowing wink. Finally, from within its small chest came a sound that, at first, was little more than a squeak. The wizard continued his chant, shaping the magic more firmly. The squeak grew into a sharp yip, then into a full bark, thin and strange, to be sure, for it rang with a brittle chiming quality, but unmistakably the protest of a dog. Charmed by his own success, the wizard laughed aloud. Here, at last, was a watchdog that would obey without question, require no food, and leave not a hair on the furniture. He opened his door, set the glass dog on the worn mat outside, and commanded it to guard the threshold. With its blue ribbon stiff in pride, the dog sat upright, ready. Whenever a heavy step climbed to the top landing and a fist raised to knock, the visitor was greeted instead by a burst of furious glass barking. The sound, shrill and startling, startled even the boldest and sent children scrambling away in alarm. It echoed sharply down the stairwell, puzzling those who heard it from below. Inside, the wizard smiled and turned another page in peace. Meanwhile, the glass-blower returned to his simpler room with a vial of miraculous medicine. He placed it on the table beside his lunch, staring at it thoughtfully while his joints throbbed with their familiar ache. Should he swallow the drop at once, feel it warm his limbs, and chase away the stiffness? My pain is not so terrible today, he reflected. If this truly cures any illness, it would be wasteful to spend it merely on discomfort. I will save it for a day when I am near death. Then it will be of greater value. So he carried the vial to a cupboard and set it behind some old cups for safety. A little later, doubt pricked him. Would the medicine keep unused for years? Would it grow weaker as time stretched on? He decided to ask the wizard for reassurance. Taking the vial, he climbed the stairs to the top floor. But before his knuckles touched the wizard's door, the pink glass dog sprang up with surprising energy. Its chiming barks exploded so fiercely in the narrow hall that the glass blower flinched and stepped back. The dog showed its tiny teeth of clear glass, its tail stiff with warning. "It is only I," the glass blower protested. The dog cared nothing for explanations. It barked on as it had been commanded. The noise seemed near to cracking his eardrums. With his heart pounding, he retreated down the stairs, vowing not to face that cold, glittering guardian again if he could help it. Back in his room, he placed the precious vial more carefully than ever in the cupboard, shut the door, and tried to return his mind to shaping roses. But he found himself glancing often toward the shelf. Chapter 3. The Richest Patient in Town. The city in which they lived was one where news traveled quickly, especially when it concerned wealth and misfortune. One morning, as the glass blower unfolded a newspaper he had borrowed from a neighbor, a headline caught his eye. The article spoke of a young woman named Miss Midas, renowned as the wealthiest unmarried lady in town. Her father had left her mansions, investments, and jewels. Suitors hovered around her like moths around a lamp. Recently, however, an illness had come upon her so severe that the most learned doctors had despaired. The glass blower's gaze slid from the printed words to the cupboard where his single drop of cure-all rested. An idea struck him with such force that the paper trembled in his hands. If he used the medicine on himself, he would be comfortable but remain poor. His roses would still need to be blown, his rent still earned. If he used it to heal this wealthy lady, perhaps he might receive in gratitude what he had never possessed in all his years: security, comfort, and companionship. He was no villain by nature, merely practical. Hard labor had given him little. A small cleverness might, he thought, bring him everything. He washed himself carefully, smoothing his rough beard and taming his hair as best he could. He put on his one decent suit, brushed the dust from its shoulders, and polished his shoes until they shone. Then he fetched the tiny vial, slipped it into his pocket as if it were a diamond, and locked his own door behind him. The mansion of Miss Midas stood in a quiet street lined with trees, its windows tall, its steps broad. A bell rope hung at the front door. When he tugged it, the sound reverberated within. After a pause, the door opened a few inches, and a dignified man in livery looked out, a butler whose expression suggested that he had seen too many peddlers at that threshold. "Whatever you are selling, we need none of it," the butler said before the glass blower could speak. "My young lady is at death's door. The undertaker has been consulted, the mourning cloth chosen. Leave us to our grief." "I sell nothing," the glass blower protested. "I am no dealer in soap or hair oil or cookbooks. I have come to cure your mistress." The butler raised one eyebrow, unimpressed. "We require no more doctors. They have given up, and she has given up on them." "I am not a doctor," the glass blower insisted, holding his ground. "I am a man with a remedy none of them possess." Something in his earnestness pierced the butler's practiced indifference. "Wait here," he said with a sigh, and admitted the visitor to a hallway filled with carpet so thick the glass blower's shoes seemed to sink into them. "I will speak to the housekeeper." Thus began a small procession of consultation. The butler spoke to the housekeeper, who murmured to the steward, who, after some thought, mentioned the matter to the chef. The chef, busy with sauces and soups, simply kissed the lady's maid and told her to investigate. The maid, used to being sent up and down the servants' staircase with news of visitors, finally approached the glass-blower. He explained, as simply as he could, that he possessed a single drop of magical medicine capable of curing any illness instantly. The maid's eyes widened. "If you restore my mistress, I shall bless the day you were born," she said impulsively. "Blessings are kind," he replied, "but I ask a larger reward. If I save her life, she must accept me as her husband." The maid studied him. His hands were rough and stained, his beard uneven, his posture slightly stooped from years at the furnace. He hardly matched the usual suitors who arrived in carriages, yet desperation makes many things appear possible. "I will put your condition to her," she agreed. In the grand bedroom above, Miss Matus lay among pillows, her face pale, her eyes hollow from fever. At first she frowned when her maid mentioned a stranger offering a cure, but when she heard the price he asked, a flicker of humor lit her gaze. "Marry him," she said. "If his medicine works, I would marry a lamppost rather than die. Bring him to me at once." So the glass-blower was ushered into her presence. He bowed, his heart pounding. Without hesitation, he drew out the vial, uncorked it, and let the single drop fall into a glass of water. It dissolved instantly, leaving the liquid clear and ordinary to the eye. He held it out. "Drink," he said. Miss Midas, whose wealth had not saved her from the fear of death, took the glass and swallowed its contents. For a moment, nothing changed. Then color flooded back into her cheeks as though someone had lit a lamp behind her pale skin. Her eyes brightened, and she sat up, stretching her arms as if from a long sleep. "How strange!" she exclaimed. "I feel as though I had never been ill at all. Marie, fetch my pearl gown. There is a reception tonight at the Fritter's house, and I have no intention of missing it. And please, somewhere in your busy memory, inform the florist that the wreaths and lilies may be canceled." The glass-blower stared in awe. The drop had worked exactly as promised. He felt both triumphant and suddenly very small in such surroundings. "Miss," he said, clearing his throat, "you will remember your agreement. You are cured. I hope you will now consent to be my wife." She glanced at him as she might glance at a piece of furniture, curiously, but without warmth. "Yes, yes," she replied, distracted. "There is the small question of announcements, of course. These matters cannot be rushed. Come back tomorrow, and we shall discuss it properly." Before he could object, the maid and the bustle of servants returning her room to its lively rhythm swept him gently toward the door. He stepped back into the hall, his heart divided between hope and unease. Yet he chose to dwell on hope. She had not refused, he told himself. She merely wished for the ceremony of society. He walked home, imagining carriages, fine meals, a comfortable chair by a warm fire. In a fit of certainty, he gathered his glass-blowing tools, rod, molds, instruments, all the modest arsenal of his trade, and hurled them out of the window into the alley. What need had the future husband of Miss Midas for such things? That evening he sat in his bare room and made lists of how he would spend her fortune. He saw himself purchasing a grander suit, dining on fine dishes, perhaps even moving to a house where no ceiling leaked and no furnace smoked. Sleep came slowly but sweetly. Chapter 4. A bargain forgotten and a dog stolen. The next day, as the clock in the hallway of the Midas mansion chimed a languid hour, the glass-blower returned. The butler, seeing a well-dressed gentleman arrive without packages or samples, admitted him politely. Miss Midas reclined on a chaise in a light-filled room, flipping the pages of a novel with one hand and plucking chocolates from a tray with the other. She greeted him with a pleasant indifference she might show a neighbor at a garden party. "You see, I am quite recovered," she said. "Your medicine was astonishing." "I am glad," he replied, his voice hopeful. "And about our agreement, my proposal?" She tilted her head. "Tell me first," she said, "from where you obtained such a marvel. Surely no apothecary sells such drops." Pleased with his cleverness and thinking to improve her opinion of him, he described the wizard upstairs in the tenement, his books and vials, and the arrangement they had made for the glass dog. He described, too, how the little pink animal barked at visitors, allowing the wizard at last to study undisturbed. Miss Midas's eyes sparkled with sudden interest. "A glass dog that barks," she murmured. "How charmingly unusual! I have always wished for something no one else possesses." "It is indeed unique," he said. "There is only the one." "Then you must obtain it for me," she said at once. The glass blower felt a twist of alarm. "I fear the wizard values it greatly. He will not part with it for money." "Then you must obtain it without money," she replied with a little wave of her hand. "I cannot be expected to endure another day without such a creature once I know it exists. I should be miserable. I might fall ill again. Think how dreadful that would be." He hesitated, torn between loyalty to the wizard and desire to please the woman who, he still believed, would soon be his wife. "I will see what can be done," he said. On the way home, he purchased a coarse sack, large enough to hold a small animal. He told himself that the wizard, immersed in his books, used the dog only as a kind of doorbell. Perhaps the matter of real ownership was not so important. After all, had he not earned something extraordinary by giving up his one drop of cure-all? That evening, climbing the stairs with the sack rolled under his arm, he found the pink dog already at its post outside the wizard's door. The little creature barked as soon as it saw him, hopping slightly on its glass paws. "Good dog," he murmured, heart pounding. Then, in a quick motion, he tossed the sack over the creature, muffling its chiming barks. Before it could struggle free, he drew the mouth tight with twine. The bundle wriggled faintly, edges rattling, but it could not escape. He hurried down the stairs and into his own room, trembling with guilt and excitement. That night, he arranged for a messenger boy to carry the sack to Miss Midas's mansion with a polite note. After the boy left, he slept fitfully, dreaming of glass paws scratching at rough cloth. Later that day, expecting gratitude, he dressed in his best again and called upon Miss Midas. The butler opened the door, as before, but before a word passed between them, the glass-blower heard a familiar chiming bark and saw, to his horror, the pink dog bounding toward him from within the entry hall, its glass eyes blazing with recognition. It set upon him with such a clamor that he nearly tumbled backward down the steps. "Call your dog off!" he cried in panic. "I cannot," said the butler over the noise. "My young lady has commanded that it bark at you whenever you appear." "If it bites, will I die?" the glass-blower gasped, edging away. "I do not know," replied the butler thoughtfully, "but you might become afflicted with some peculiar ailment. One should avoid being bitten by anything made entirely of glass. Terrified, the glass-blower retreated to the safety of the street. His mind whirled. He walked until he found a small drugstore with a public telephone in the corner. Emptying his last coin into the slot, he asked to be connected to the Midas residence. Miss Midas' cool voice came over the line. "Why have you set the dog upon me?" he pleaded. "What have I done to deserve such cruelty?" She sounded almost amused. "You have done nothing, save remind me that I prefer not to marry you," she answered. She then listed calmly all the things she disliked about his appearance: his pale, sagging cheeks, coarse hair, small red eyes, large hands, and bowed legs. "I could not possibly tie my future to such a figure," she concluded. "Stay away from my house, or the dog will ensure you regret it." "But you promised," he whispered. "I promised under the shadow of death," she replied. "I am now perfectly well." With that, she ended the call. The glassblower walked back to his room like a man moving through water. His hopes had collapsed as abruptly as they had risen. The tools he had thrown away were gone. The dog he had stolen no longer served him. His last coin lay in the telephone box. With numb fingers, he tied a rope to the bedpost. His thoughts turned toward ending what seemed a hopeless life. Chapter 5. Beauty for a Price. As he stood measuring the rope, a knock came at his door. Startled, he opened it. There stood the wizard, his expression unusually troubled. "My dog has vanished," the wizard announced without preamble. "Has it?" murmured the glassblower, the rope dangling in his hand. "Yes, I returned from collecting herbs to find my door unguarded and only a little space where he once sat. Someone has stolen him." "That is unfortunate," said the glassblower flatly. The wizard studied him. "You must make me another dog," he said. "I cannot," replied the glassblower. "In my foolishness, I destroyed my tools. There can be no second pink dog." The wizard sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Then suggest some means by which I may recover him," he said. "Without his barking, my work is tormented once more by knocks and questions." "You could offer a reward?" the glassblower suggested, without much interest. "Something that would tempt the thief to confess." "I own no coins," the wizard reminded him. "You possess many powders and potions," said the glassblower bleakly, glancing at the rope. "Surely there is one thing you can spare to bribe the greedy," the wizard thought. After a moment, he said, "There is a small jar of powder I seldom use. It has one property only. Whoever consumes it becomes the most beautiful person in the world. The effect lasts as long as the skin remains intact. Beneath, I assure you, nothing is changed." At these words, the glassblower's heart gave a painful leap. The cruel assessment of Miss Midas echoed in his ears. If he could become beautiful, so beautiful that even a wealthy woman would be dazzled, perhaps he could still claim some measure of the future he had dreamed. "If you offer that powder as a reward," he said swiftly, "I will help you find your dog." "I warn you," the wizard said, somewhat amused, "beauty alone does not guarantee happiness." "Neither does ugliness," the glassblower replied. "Between the two, I prefer the former." "Very well," agreed the wizard. "Tell me where my dog is hidden, and the powder is yours." The glassblower hesitated only long enough to take a breath. "Miss Midas's mansion," he said. "I sent the dog there in a sack, as a gift she requested. He stands now in her hall, barking at visitors." The wizard's eyes narrowed, but he asked no further questions. Turning on his heel, he left at once. At the Midas house, the butler again opened the door. The pink dog snapped and chimed wildly at the wizard's ankles, but its magic was his own. With a gesture and a murmured word, he cast a brief sleep charm. The dog's glass eyes closed. Its barking ceased mid-echo. It toppled gently into his arms, limp as any ordinary toy. The butler watched, astonished, but the wizard merely nodded and carried his guardian away. True to his word, he later placed in the glass-blower's trembling hands a small packet of fine powder, pale as ground pearl. "Mix it with water and drink," he instructed. "Your outward form will change to match the desires of your heart, at least as far as beauty is concerned." Without hesitation, the glass-blower fetched a cup, dissolved the powder, and swallowed it in a few eager gulps. His body tingled. A warmth spread across his skin. He hurried to the small mirror nailed to his wall. The face that gazed back at him now was not the one he had known for years. The sagging cheeks had lifted, smooth and firm. His eyes now shone clear and bright, framed by long, dark lashes. His hair fell in glossy waves. His beard had vanished entirely, leaving a strong, clean jaw. Even his posture had straightened, lending him a noble bearing. His hands appeared finer, his figure lithe. He stared in wonder. "I am beautiful," he whispered, hardly believing his own reflection. All thought of ropes and disappointments melted away. He donned his best clothes again, though now they hung slightly differently on his transformed frame, and set out once more for Miss Midas's mansion. This time, when the butler opened the door, no glass dog barked. The wizard had reclaimed his guardian. The butler's eyes widened involuntarily at the sight of the visitor's handsome face and graceful manner. He bowed more deeply and admitted him without a word. Miss Midas looked up from a letter as he entered her sitting room. At the sight of him, she caught her breath. Here, before her, stood the very figure she had often imagined in idle moments. Tall, splendidly featured, eyes bright with intelligence. "How can I serve you?" she asked, her tone suddenly soft. "It is I," he said, "the man whose medicine returned your health." She frowned faintly, then laughed. Impossible. That man was plain as a shoe and walked as if his legs had quarreled with one another. "I have changed," he replied. "A friend gave me a gift." She studied him again, the new admiration clear. "If only you were of noble birth," she sighed. "A count, perhaps, or a prince. Then I could marry you at once." His longing seized the opportunity. "Why, madam, I am a prince," he declared, "the prince of all who blow glass dogs and flowers." She considered this. Titles, she had learned, could be very flexible things. "Very well, my prince," she said. "If you will accept a modest allowance of $4 a week, after all, even princes should earn something, I shall arrange for our wedding cards to be engraved." The sum was meager, but the memory of the rope still hung in his mind. "I accept," he said. In due time, announcements appeared stating that Miss Midas would wed a foreign prince of mysterious lineage. Society buzzed approvingly. The wedding took place amid flowers and music. Yet marriage built upon illusions seldom yields the contentment its dreamers imagine. Chapter 6 of Dogs, Wizards, and the Shape of Happiness. As husband and wife, the newly made prince and Miss Midas soon discovered that beauty and wealth do not automatically turn daily life into a storybook. The bride admired her husband fiercely, but her admiration quickly narrowed into jealousy. She disliked it when other women glanced appreciatively at him during dinners. She questioned him about every glance and smile he gave. The prince, for his part, had no steady work now that his tools were gone, and his wife disapproved of furnace smoke. The allowance she handed him each week never seemed enough. He developed a habit of spending more than he had, borrowing against future weeks. Debt crept after them like a shadow. Arguments, sharp and frequent, entered their house. The wizard, meanwhile, replaced the pink dog outside his own door and restored its barking with a snap of his fingers. Once more, icemen, salesmen, and applicants for cheap magic found themselves turned away by the fierce chiming of glass. Inside, the wizard returned to his studies, his life looping back to its familiar solitude. From time to time, perhaps while measuring ingredients for a new potion, he might have wondered what became of the glassblower who had wanted beauty above all things. Yet wizards are more curious about the behavior of elements than of neighbors, and the question drifted away like smoke. As for the glass dog, it sat faithfully at its post, bright and unaging. Those who braved the climb to the top floor heard its sharp, bell-like barks and decided that whatever lay beyond that door was too peculiar to bother. Children in the tenement whispered stories about it. Some said it could bite and turn flesh to crystal. Others that it could see into a person's heart. Perhaps on clear evenings when the light slanted through the stairwell just so, the dog's glass eyes caught a glint of the world outside and reflected it inward, reminding the wizard that the boundary between his room and the noisy city was guarded by something both fragile and fierce. The tale of the glass dog, the ambitious glass blower, the practical wizard, and the rich young lady holds more than one possible lesson. One might observe that bargains made in desperation seldom lead to happiness. Another might notice that beauty applied only to the surface of things changes neither character nor fate, or one could conclude that guarding one's peace may cost less trouble than trying to remake the entire world outside one's door. Whatever moral each listener chooses, the story leaves them with a final image: a small pink dog of glass, endlessly watchful, barking its bright, brittle warning at every hand that reaches to knock. Behind the door, a wizard bends over his books. Below, in another part of the city, a once humble artisan walks halls of marble, handsome and uneasy. Between them lies the simple truth that magic can alter appearances and even shift fortune. But the hearts of those who seek it must still learn in their own slow way what they truly desire and what price they are willing to pay to keep it. For more stories that can help you relax, don't forget to like and subscribe.